Here we go. We're going to spend this week, this session and the next session on single whip because there's so much in single whip. So look forward to a week of whipping singly. Let's start out with some of the drills, and then we'll do a first third, then we'll start working on it. So the squatting exercise, feet wider than shoulder wide, making sure that the toes go in a line, the knees go in a line with the toes as you squat. So sitting down and standing back up. First thing about this is to notice the rotation that happens in the legs. So the thigh rotates out, the calf rotates in, and the arch increases as you squat. So watch that playing out down through the legs. Not just a simple hinge, but actually change happening in the legs. Continuing to feel the change happening in the legs. Pay attention to your diaphragm. Breathing in as you sit down, breathing out as you stand up. Diaphragm engages and drops as you sit down, and then resumes its dome shape as you stand up. And feel the changes work through the body. Pelvis broadening as you sit down, torso narrowing, aimed towards the rear crown of the head as you stand up. But particularly pay attention to the changes in the legs. Another couple. And great, take a break. Shifting forward and back in and out of a 70-30. We'll do both sides. Start forward, release into the front foot, which starts to move you back. Shift to the back. Release down, which starts to move you forward. Shift to the front. Notice the change from leg to leg when the leg takes over and becomes the supporting leg. Front leg is supporting me, front leg is supporting me, back leg is supporting me. Back leg is supporting me, front leg is supporting me. Get that change crisp. When you have clarity about the supporting leg, look at the action. As I shift forward, I drop down through my rear leg right at 50-50. The rebound comes up through the rear leg and takes me forward. As I sit back, I drop down through my front leg right at 50-50. The rebound comes through the front leg and takes me back. So there's two things happening. The change in supporting leg and the action in the active leg. Once more, back and forward. And the other side, starting in the front. Release down, which starts to take you back right at 50-50. The rear leg takes over and supports you. Release down, which starts to take you forward right at 50-50. The front leg takes over and supports you. Support changes at the 50-50 place. You only have one leg. Only one leg is holding you up. And then look at the action as you sit down. The energy goes down through your front leg, then it comes back up through the front leg as you move back. As you come forward, it goes down through the rear leg, then it comes back up through the rear leg as you come forward. The supporting leg and the active are not the same, and they change differently. Rear leg is supporting me, front leg is supporting me. Front leg is supporting me, rear leg is supporting me. Rear leg is active all the way forward. Front leg is active all the way back. Once more, back and forward. Great. So the reason to do these drills, especially to do them at the start before you do your practice, is so that you remind yourself of those feelings, and then you can watch it happen while you actually do your form. So let's do a first third, whole thing, and then we'll work on single whip. Go ahead. Great. Okay, good old single whip. We'll do square form checkpoints, and then we'll work on how to round it. There's a lot in single whip, so we can easily spend 2 hours looking at all the pieces on it. And even then, we definitely won't have touched everything. But this should be a good couple hours to tune your single whips. Professor Chung said that when he created his 37 posture form from the longer yang form, he took out all the unnecessary repetitions. And he left 5 single whips in the form. So those 5 single whips are necessary repetitions, and he thought it was pretty crucial to actually have them. So worth spending some time on. Let's take it from push. I'll face this way, and Beth will face the nominal canonical way, and we'll just run through it. So, from push, make sure you've got a good push. Sit back 100%. Turn the waist, making sure everything moves together. Shift to the right, turn to the right, gathering the hook. Turn the waist, extending the hook. Step for a 70-30. Shift, left hand comes up, more weight forward. Turn the waist, rear foot on heel, single whip. Again, pay attention as we're doing this. I'm going to stop, not this time or the next time, but we will stop at all the checkpoints. And so see if in your mind you're already clear on those, and if you're actually hitting them exactly or not. And then we'll work on them. So push. Go ahead, sitting back. Turning. Shifting and turning. Turning. Step. Shift. Last minute. Turn the waist. Front hand. Once more. Go ahead. Okay, so let's look at some of the square form stuff. Before we start looking at the shifting and turning and everything, let's actually look at that hook. So in the hook, you want all of your fingers to come together and join. And you want it to have this kind of a rounded shape, not a pinched, held together shape. So as you're doing this, hold your right wrist up with your left hand, just like both Beth and I are doing. And see that the wrist is completely soft. And bring the fingers together and see that the wrist is still soft. If you bounce it with your left hand, there should be play there. Now pinch the fingers together so you get that other shape and see what that does. So don't do that. Bring them together. When you bring them together, make sure that all 4 fingers touch the thumb. Not enough to just touch the other fingers. They have to all come in and touch the thumb. So, we'll often say all 5 fingers come together, all 4 proper fingers touch the thumb. Make sure you actually get that. Don't let the little pinky hang out on its own. And make sure it's a curve, not this pinching shape. So you want to really get that hook shape. So when we make the hook, you'll remember to do that. So checkpoints, do this with me. Take push, and we're going to check the 100% first. So sit back 100%, the forearms lay down, and your front foot is empty. You can float it. So back into push. Sit back 100%, the elbows rise, the forearms lay down, front foot is empty. You can float it. Take a break. So when you do that first sitting back, you're moving away from the hands. So, we'll often say the forearms lay down like I just did, but that's not the action. It's not going like this, laying the forearms down. And look where my hands ended up there. My upper arms are still in the same place that they were when I was in push. So that's not it. So what happens is the elbows rise, the forearms lay down, and the feeling is that you're moving away from the hands. So that lengthens the arm. See here, my upper arm has changed. The arm's not just down there. So the upper arm has changed as you do that. So sometimes it can feel softer to just kind of lay the arms down. But you see, the motion of that is different. That's a hand dropping, and it leads to a kind of deflated place. Versus as if hanging off of the clothesline, like Beth is doing here. If I'm a clothespin hanging off the clothesline, when she moves away from it, it lengthens her arm and stretches it out like that. So let's do that again. Sit back 100%, forearms lay down. Now your hands should still be right in front of your shoulders. Don't let them broaden or narrow as you're doing that, right? As you sit back, it just stays exactly the same. They don't get wider, they don't get narrower, they certainly don't turn. So back to push. Sit back 100%, forearms lay down, elbows rise. Make sure you're really 100%. Now turn, pivoting on the heel, and stop. Check it out. Nose is still over belly button. You didn't turn your head at all. Shoulders are still over hips. There's really a tendency to turn the shoulders further than the hips here. Make sure you're still exactly everything aligned. You probably won't turn as far as you think. And make sure that your empty foot is really empty. This is the hard part. And take a break. So, single whip often looks like not what it is. It's confusing. It looks like what you're doing is as you come here and turn, you're like being knock-kneed and you're pulling both of your legs together. And then when you step, you're opening as wide as you can and turning away from both legs. That's not what happens. The hip joints alternate as you go through this. So when I sit back, my rear hip joint is going to close. That is to say, I turn towards the rear hip joint. But make sure the empty right hip joint is still flat and hanging. If you pull it in, you'll never be able to separate that foot because it'll activate that whole leg. So let it hang, and the way you separate the weight and check it is you allow the knee to drop, and that will pick the foot up. Don't feel like you're picking everything up. If you do that, you'll go back into the knock-kneed place and you'll activate that front leg. So really make sure that your right leg is just hanging. So from push. Sit back 100%, forearms lay down, elbows rise, hands are still shoulder wide, nose over belly button. Turn the whole thing as a unit. Don't let there be any twisting. Check it out. Nose over belly button, shoulders, hands still in front of shoulders, shoulders over hips, no twist, and let your right knee drop in order to pick up your right foot. Make sure you really can separate here. Do whatever it takes. Figure out how to really separate. Don't just say, oh, I can't quite separate, because you'll end up in the middle here and you won't be able to do it. So really get onto the left leg. Take a break. There's a number of places in the form where we might not ride you for separation, especially initially. This is one where it's really important to separate because the move is so tight and small, compressed, that it's really easy to miss it, and then you'll miss a critical skill. So you have to separate here. Now, when we teach the first third to people, we usually don't make them separate there because they can't. But this is the deep dive. So if you're working through this deep dive with us, really separate. And then the same thing is going to happen next when I turn to the right and gather the hook. Same thing. This is not knock-kneed. The right claw is closed now. The left is open and hanging. And to separate, feel that your left knee drops, not picking the whole thing up, but letting the knee drop, which allows the foot to come off the ground. And really separate here. Make sure that you're clear about the two of them. Don't slop from foot to foot. I sit back and I turn. I'm still in my left leg. Don't end up in the right already. This happens all the time to people. As they're turning, their weight slops into the right and they don't even know. So make sure you're in the left. And then when you turn to the right, make sure you really turn to the right and make sure you really let the left leg go so that you're 100%. Again, as people do this, they end up in the right leg, and as they're gathering the hook, they end up in both. And I can't pick up either foot now. So don't do that. Really separate. Push. Sit back 100%. Elbows rose, forearms dropped, front foot is empty. Turn. Keep it turning as a unit. No twisting. Stop. Check to make sure you're not twisted. Hands in front of shoulders, nose over belly button, shoulders over hips, and 100%. Let your right knee drop and float the right foot off the ground. Make sure you haven't actually shifted into the right already. Now shift and turn, gathering the hook, making sure that the right claw is closing, leaving the left hanging, and check your separation. By dropping the left knee, letting the foot come off the ground. Take a break. Now, if you've twisted any of those places, if you've turned the shoulders further than the hips, this is going to be really hard to do. So it's one of those indicators that maybe you've twisted if you can't do the separation. And make sure you turn to the right after you shift to the right. This is another place that people miss. They just shift and grab the hook, and they haven't actually turned to the right. When you turn to the right, that's going to close the right claw. So make sure you have that feeling of the pelvis coming towards the right thigh. If you just stay in place, then the other thing that's going to happen is the next no-no. When you send the hook out, it's going to take a curved path rather than going directly along the line of the hook. So, again, and we're actually going to go all the way to single whip this time because I want to do the separation for the big step. Push. Sit back, forearms lay down, elbows come up, hands in front of hips, in front of shoulders, nose over belly button, and separated. Turn, keeping that alignment, no twisting. Might not turn as far as you think. Check your separation. Really, you can pick up the right foot. Shift to the right, turn to the right, closing the right claw. Make sure the left foot is really empty. You can pick it up. Turn, extending the hook right exactly along a straight line. Step, heel first, shoulder wide, no weight. Pick that foot back up. Shift. Not square yet. Last minute, turn the waist, rear foot on heel. Great, take a break. So that last step, biggest step we've taken so far in the first third, really quite challenging. And it may be that you're used to making it work by not quite separating. When I am really assiduous about separating, my right foot may not get as far around as I'm used to hauling it without quite being separated. So you may find this big step for the 70-30 even more challenging than usual. Now you know where it's supposed to go. You know you have to get width and length. So, when I do this, and I sit back and turn and shift and turn and extend the hook, When I step, I need to make sure I've got width as well as length. And so one of the things that happens is people step long and narrow, and then when I square, watch my rear foot, the heel has to push out. So if you find yourself coming into single whip, the final posture with your heel sliding out, that's a clue that you didn't step wide enough. So let's run through this with checkpoints a couple more times, and then I'll turn it over to Beth, who will start rounding the corners. Push. Sit back 100%. Check it out. Actually 100%. Turn. Make sure there's no twisting. Nose over belly button, shoulders over hips, hands directly in front of the shoulders, all the weight in the left. In the left. You haven't shifted into the right already. Now, shift to the right, turn to the right, gather the hook. Make sure the left leg is hanging. And, separated. Turn, extend the hook, and now step for the big step, making sure you get enough width, making sure you're staying body upright, making sure you're putting that foot down empty. Then shift, keep the waist slightly in the corner, and finish turning. Hand turns over, waist turns. Great. Take a break. So we'll do it twice more. But one thing to say is single whip is different from most 70-30s. Most 70-30s, as we're going into them, we're turning and shifting, and everything finishes together. I get square right as I get my weight forward. There's no, we might teach it to you as shift, 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 then turn. But when you actually do it, you're shifting and turning together. In single whip, make sure that you've actually gotten your weight there, and then there's a last turn. So single whip is different than the others. As I come through here and I'm shifting, I'm turning, but I'm completely 70% here at the end. And then there's one last turn, which takes me to the front. That's when the rear foot turns in. Going into one of the other 70-30s, the rear foot turns in and I finish. Going into single whip, the rear foot turns in at the end. So it's got a slightly different punctuation than the others. So again, twice more with checkpoints. Sit back, 100%. Check it. Turn without twisting. 100%. Drop the knee. Right foot floats. Right foot floats, not left. Shift to the right. Turn to the right. Grabbing the hook. Left knee drops. Left foot floats. Turn, extend the hook. Step, heel first. Shoulder wide. No weight. Shift. Last minute, turn the waist, rear foot on heel. Different punctuation than the other 70-30s. Okay, once more. Sit back. All the weight. All the weight. Turn, keeping aligned. All the weight. Shift and turn. All the weight. Turn, extending the hook. Step, heel first. No weight. Shift. Last minute, turn. Great. Okay, now let's breathe some life into that.
Let's do some more. I want to look at how the legs work
and how sitting back keeps you on top of your leg. So that's the first thing I want to look at, because we talk about how you absolutely have to separate, and you do, and we use the words that our teachers all used when we were learning from them, because those are the words that come out of our mouth, which is sit back. So you're in push, and you sit onto the back leg. You're sitting on top of the back leg. Even though we're not using all those words and we just say sit back, that means sit back onto the back leg. It doesn't mean sit as far back as you can. You see what happens here. As you sit into your back leg, if you just move your torso a lot to put it back here. Now look at my alignment. When I try to turn, I'm caught. Look what's happening. Everything gets thrown out of alignment because I wasn't sitting on top of my leg. When I sit on top of my back leg and turn, I've got a couple things going on. One is I can stay upright, I can stay in a good shape, and I can turn more. I can turn a lot more when I'm on top of my leg than I can when I sit back and let this get stuck out. Then look what happens. That's about as far, and now everything just twists me and throws me offline. It can be tempting to do that because it's harder to sit on top of your leg and get all your weight there so that the other foot can float. It's easier to do this and pick up the leg. So all this work on separation is crucial, it's critical, it's the heart of our art, the separation of yin and yang, but you don't lose Taiji to pick up your foot. You don't make separation be the goal without following the principles. So sitting back and lifting up your foot is not it. You want to be on top of your leg. It becomes even more critical at this point here. When we come around, you really need to be on top of this leg so that you can hang the other leg. And then when it changes, same thing. You need to be on top of your leg so that the other one can hang. You know, Lee talked about the changing hip joint thing, and that which when I go toward my left leg, I'm creasing and folding the left quad. The right one needs to hang. When I change, now I'm going to crease and fold the right quad, and that means the left one needs to hang. If I sit this way and turn, notice what happens. This quad doesn't change. It's not closing. It just, the whole unit comes around together and it doesn't change. And that also means I can't hang the empty leg. So this is, it's worth paying some real attention to how this works. And you might find that, oddly enough, that this exercise helps you do that because it helps you find the rotation right on top of the socket so that you're really in a good shape to be able to turn. If you lose that relationship at the hip, you will be notified by your foot. The bottom of your foot will change. So play around with this with me for a minute. We're just going to do that first, going from push to 100% on the back leg. And I want you to feel the bottom of your foot when we do the big travel that doesn't get you on top of it, and then when we do the different version that really puts you in a good position to keep moving from. So, from push. And let's just do the naive thing. Just go all the way back. And now, where is your weight on your left foot? You might be able to pick up your empty foot easily, but where's the weight? It's going to be on the heel and the outer edge of your foot, most likely. And notice what happens when you try to pick up your empty foot. It kind of all comes as a piece because it isn't really that empty because you've kind of put yourself in an untenable position. So shake out your legs, and now we'll do it where we're sitting on top of the leg. So, and go. Get yourself on top of your back leg. Really feel the bottom of your foot. Get that good connection through the tripod. And now, notice that you can empty this right leg from the hip joint down. You can empty it out of the socket. Come back to push and just do that much again. Feel the bottom of your left foot. And as you shift, keep feeling the bottom of your left foot and notice where that takes you. Okay, and rest your legs. And then there's one more piece to this, and it's this feeling. When you sit onto your left leg here, and you're sitting up on top of it, there's that same shape in your leg. If you keep your leg like a table leg, and you just move back on it, it's going to be really hard to sit up on top of it and pick up your empty leg. When you let that shape happen in your leg so that there's a slight rotation outward in the thigh and the calf does the opposite and you've got that good connection through the left foot, then you're much more in a position to free the other leg and have it be a stable place rather than just having it be a peg leg that you're standing on. So letting it change just like it changes when you do this is going to be part of giving you stability and mobility to rotate on top of that leg. So let's do it again. And go. Sitting on top of that leg. Feel how it's connected. And now let's move to the next piece of this, keeping the weight at the bottom of your foot. Letting that rotation go through the leg. Now you've got all your weight in your left, and right's going to take over. And the same thing's happening there. You want to be on top of your leg. You want to have a good connection through your foot. And that's the way that you're going to be able to drop the knee to empty the leg. So rest your legs. That's also how you're going to make the great big step. So I'm sort of looking at this same quality in all the different places when we're on one leg or another. Then we're going to put it back together and look at it a little more. But I want to just, for thoroughness, show you how that big step is really facilitated by that change in the leg that you're standing on. So you've come around and you're getting ready to step. The right leg, the knee has to stay with the toe, but you need to move away from it. So that opening of the thigh away from the center line is it's exactly the same thing when you do this. That's what you're going to do here to create a stable place where you can place your foot without putting weight in it. So let's just do the whole move, paying attention to the way that this rotation through the legs, and you have to be sitting on top of your legs to make all this work. You know, when we do these squats, We don't do this and then try to make it happen, because now I'm not on top of my legs and the whole thing goes wonky. So same quality, do it a couple times just so you get that feeling back, feeling that rotation in the legs, feeling how the weight transmits through your legs, how your legs are very involved in sending the weight down and letting it release back through. One more time. And now let's do single whip. I'm going to do it the same direction. And go. Sitting on top of your leg. You're in a good position. Your weight is in your back leg. Turn on top of that leg. Weight is still in that leg. Shift. Now you're on top of your right leg. You can hang the left knee. Continue. Now, make sure your foot's pointing straight ahead. Go ahead and adjust it if it hasn't reached that place. And do that same squatting feeling through your right leg as you step for single whip and complete the move. Great. So remember, if you can't separate when you're coming through here and here, don't let this happen to make the foot come off the ground. Really take your time, go stand, hold on to something, figure out what you need to do to get that working without distorting and swinging out your hip to make some room to empty the foot. Don't make the empty foot be more important than following Taiji principles. So let's do this again, and I want to remind you of where we started with the shifting, that you're going to be doing that now. So rather than just going to the back leg right away, you're going to make that same quality of shift. I mean, I'm not going to talk us through every little bit of this, but I want you to notice that the beginning motion is that you give in to the full leg. That starts moving you back. Your back leg takes over, and that's what gets you to this place. And at this point, you should still be able to have all the weight in your back leg and separate and all that. But you got there a little differently. So come back to push. And give in, that starts you moving back. As soon as your back leg can take over, it takes over. That's what gets you there. Now, turn. Gathering into that left leg, it's got to have that same quality of transmitting through the leg. So just come on back to that place. And giving in, that starts moving you toward the back. Left leg takes over. Stay on top of the left leg and turn. Turn the hips. The hips, the hips, the hips. That's what turns. Only turn as far as you can turn. And stay in your left leg, keeping that foot connected, because you're gathering into that foot, and so if you let your foot roll around, it's going to get in the way. So just do that much one more time, paying attention to the bottom of the foot so you know if you're rolling around. Giving in through the front leg, that starts moving you back. You take over on the back leg, finish sitting back, turn. What's happening in your back leg? You're gathering into that leg. It needs to have a good connection through the ground. Okay, and then continue. And let's go on to the final step and posture. Rest your legs. So I'm going to skip over what happens in the middle because we've spent a bunch of time on that. We're going to do this for another whole session because there's so much here, so we're not going to get it all in any 1 hour. And I want to look at how we get into the final posture. So we've come to this place, and you let the leg change as you sink into this leg and put the foot out, weightless, but you don't just shift into that leg, but notice that you're going to come to a 50-50 place before you put the weight here. So it's not only 100% until the last moment, it has to capture that weight. While you're doing that, your left arm has come up into a position like this. The palm is kind of in alignment with my left shoulder. When I complete the move, the hand stays in position in front of me, and it's the elbow that changes. So when you get to this 50-50 place, your hand is already in alignment with the shoulder. The elbow is outside your left thigh. When you complete it, the elbow drops in. So it's a very different alignment from doing something like this. So here, my elbow's staying in, and my hand is making it happen, or the whole arm is moving with it. I want this quality. When you come into your left leg, it's a thrust. The shape of this arm is a thrusting quality. That's what puts your elbow outside. And then, at this point, this is a very open feeling. It's like I close that joint and something plays out all the way out to my hand, and that's what turns the hand palm out. So it's not just a flip the pancake thing that happens at your wrist. It's we sometimes describe this as squeezing out a toothpaste tube, because you're kind of squeezing it from here, and by moving your torso into the socket and letting the elbow drop, that's like playing out. And, this might be the whip. I don't know what the whip of single whip is, but it's got that kind of a quality where it plays out to the hand in a directed line, even as everything is changing around it. So it's a little hard to talk about, but let's see if we can't get that feeling. So I'm going to start you where you're on your right foot and it's pointing directly at a wall, and you're just getting ready to take the step. You've sent out your hook and sitting into the right leg to place your empty foot, and keep shifting until you're at your 50-50 place. And when you're going to, before you change feet, look at where your hand is, and then take over in the left leg and turn. And you can just undo that much and redo it. Notice that feeling. The arm is out round, and it gets more linear as you complete it. Rest your legs. I remember watching Maggie do this, and almost looked to me like she was holding a goblet or something in her hand here, that it was resting inside her hand. And when she completed the move, she just turned to have it on the other side of it. It had this kind of a feeling that the hand really was just moving in space, and it was everything else along the arm that was doing the changing. So now let's do the whole move a few times and look for that feeling. And go. You're giving in, taking over on the back leg. You're sitting on top of the back leg. That enables you to turn the hips. Shift and turn on the other leg. Extend the hook. And gather down into that right leg, letting it open. And change to the left. Elbow comes in, hand goes out. Let's do it again. I won't stop us through those places, but you know what to do. And go. One more time, and then I want you to hold it at the final posture. And go. Okay, now holding it there. Is your left hand in a line, more or less, with your right shoulder, or has it drifted to the outside? Is your elbow dangling? Jane would always give us what I guess were a translation of Professor Chung's words, wrist in front of shoulder, elbow dangles. So you want to make sure you're not holding it up, but it's not just in close by you. That's not a dangling elbow anymore. That elbow's holding it in. So let that out. This is a shape of maximum extension. So sit here a minute and really feel that there's a nice line running through the body, through the arm, out to your hand. And rest your legs. When you step for that 70-30, it's really easy to end up just holding this arm. You've come to this place and you're ready to step. It's like, oh man, this step is so hard. Oh. And this arm had no change to it whatsoever. Let it move with the body so that as you're sitting down into your front leg, that's becoming your back leg, your arm is moving authentically. It's getting a little bit of space as you step, and then when you sit down for your moment that you're going to transfer from one leg to the other, you've got a nice position for that arm. It's already come about as high as it's going to. And then it's just this playing out through the arm that changes it. As opposed to having held it here, step, and then you have to make this big lift happen, yes, there's a thrust, but the thrust happens from the ground, not from your arm. Nobody's going to get much oomph out of this. It's really got to be that it's the body that delivers the thrust, not the arm. So let's do it again and just pay some attention to your left arm and see that it's alive. I'm not going to tell you where it needs to be in any of these little places in between. You know where it needs to end up. So look for authentic movement that reflects what's happening in the whole body. And go. And once more. Good. What's happening with your left arm? And now let's go back to the feet, and we're just going to feel the feet and the hands. You don't need to trace things in between, but I want you to feel a unified sense. Know that your feet are level on the ground and they're not rolling around, and that your hands are not just static while you do these complicated things down below, but that there's a direct connection between the two. And go. Hands and feet. Hands and feet. So let's do a few first thirds up to single whip. Just from the beginning to single whip. You've got a lot of stuff that we've been working on. Let it all come and go as it does. Because you've been working on it, you'll be more able to do it. And just, you know, if you found it helpful to just do hands and feet, that's probably a pretty good place to look at what's happening. So let's start at the start. And go. think that probably qualifies as a good night of working.